Hey everybody, how's it going? It's Jiva and welcome back for a new video. I'm actually really excited to be here today because I'm actually back to talk to you about some fall books. So we're officially in September, which means unofficially fall has started, but I think like the general consensus with most people is that once it's September, it's time for fall. If nothing else, preparations for fall, so that counts as well. And that just ties perfectly into this video because I'm actually here to tell you about some of the books that I'm planning on reading this fall. Now you might notice there are gonna be 20 books on this list, and I'm not actually delusional enough to think I'm gonna get to all of them this fall. But I also couldn't get my overexcited brain to narrow the books down to less than 20 books, so I'm just gonna tell you about all of them. And maybe you can actually get some recommendations from this video as well. Basically, I have here 20 books with seemingly perfect fall vibes, fall themes, the atmosphere. There's not going to be much horror because I'm not much of a horror reader, so if you're looking for some horror recommendations, I'm gonna link some videos below of people who actually read horror. But in this video, you're gonna mostly find some cozy, witchy, maybe some spooky middle grades. I might have a couple of those for you, but not really much horror. Possibly one book kind of taps one of its feet into horror, but hopefully there's not gonna be too much because otherwise I can't read it. But yeah, the books on this list are more on the cozy side of autumn reading than on the spooky and the horror side. So if that's something that you're interested in, definitely keep on watching. And now it's finally time for us to jump into the list. I'm actually gonna start off with the first book, which is sort of category-less because I just didn't know where to put it. It's also possibly the most popular book on this list, but that's yet to be seen because some of the other books are still unreleased, so they could surpass its popularity. But yeah, the book is Emily Wilde's Encyclopedia of Fairies by Heather Fawcett. Now guys, this book just sounds absolutely incredible. We follow this Cambridge professor, she's called Emily Wilde, and her goal is to write the first ever encyclopedia of fairy lore. And with this in mind, she goes on a business trip up to the far north to study fairies, basically. I don't know whether Emily Wilde actually expects to come across real-life fairies, but that's exactly what ends up happening. So this cranky, grumpy old lady actually ends up discovering real fairies. She also makes some friends along the way, and she also possibly falls in love with her academic rival, who actually ends up following her up to the far north to aid with the research, to do his own research. I'm not really sure what the other character's intention is, but you know, he's just there to kind of piss off Emily Wilde, basically, but in a good way, you know? So yeah, that's what the story is about. I am incredibly excited, especially with the promise of some fairy magic with a potential grumpy sunshine romance. And I've also heard that the fairies in here can actually get pretty scary and pretty spooky, so I think that's kind of gonna be like a good little balance between some spooky times and some cozy cottage times, and this book just promises to give it all. So yeah, I'm definitely very excited, and this book is definitely very high on my priority list for this autumn. Possibly I'm gonna jump into this one in September still because it just sounds perfect, you know? So yeah, that was Emily Wilde's Encyclopedia. I'm quickly just gonna show you this cover as well. I don't know whether you've seen it already, but it just sounds... doesn't it look so fairy-like? This is exactly what you would expect like an encyclopedia of fairies to look like, I think. So yeah, very nice work with the cover. Both the US and the UK editions, actually, both are absolutely gorgeous. Okay, now we're gonna move on to some more contemporary romances, but some of these seem to have a little paranormal twist to them as well. So like, there could possibly be some ghosts, some curses, and some little hints of magic. This first one doesn't have any of that though. This first one is actually called Morbidly Yours by Ivy Fairbanks. In the story, we actually follow a couple of characters. First off, we have Callum Family, and he actually is from a family who owns a mortuary. And Callum's dream has always been to actually inherit the family business, so he really wants to run the mortuary in the future. But unfortunately, his parents have put on the condition that if he wants a family business, he has to marry by his 35th birthday. This wouldn't be a problem if, you know, Callum actually had any luck with love, which he doesn't. And this is why he ends up asking for help the lady who lives next to the mortuary. Enter Laura Thompson. She actually hates living next to the mortuary because for her it's a constant reminder of the late husband that she has lost. And because of this, I think she's more agreeable to actually join up with Callum and help him look for the one, but I think everybody present here can actually tell where the story is going to go. And I am kind of excited. Now this one is just straight up contemporary romance, but it just sounds perfect. I think it's gonna be like a nice change of pace away from the witches and the ghosts and the haunted mansions and all these other themes that kind of fall under fall reading category. I think this one is gonna be pretty cool, and I am living for the title and the cover and everything else about this book. Like, nothing is more fall to me than there being graveyard and, you know, a grave on the cover. And it's called Morbidly Yours. Like, how much more perfect could a book be for fall reading? Next up, we have a book called Shake of the Ghost by Miranda Newfield. And in this one, we actually follow a young lady who ends up applying for a job of being a house sitter for a mansion in Scotland. Everything about that sentence is perfection, if you ask me. But unfortunately, what at first is seemingly like a perfect job opportunity, like being paid to look after a mansion in Scotland, sounds like a dream. But unfortunately, when the main character ends up arriving at the mansion, she realizes it could possibly be haunted. There's a blue lady that she keeps seeing around the mansion, but unfortunately the ghost isn't even the biggest trouble. The biggest trouble ends up being the heir to the owners of the mansion, who is just the most arrogant but also the most beautiful man the main character has ever seen. Once again, I think we all know which direction this book is gonna go for, but besides the fun romance, I just have a feeling the book is gonna deliver some very nice scenography of Scotland and this imagery of a mansion in the middle of the Scotland Highlands. And of course we have the ghost. Like, you can't go wrong with a ghostly book in fall, you know? So yeah, this book just sounds like it's gonna be a fun and quick read with a little bit of fun and romance and some ghosts. So yeah, definitely I'm looking forward to it. So that was Shake of the Ghosts. Okay, moving on to the next story. It actually is in some ways similar to the previous one, but not all the way. So this one is called Do Your Wars by Rosie Danan, and in this one we actually follow a couple of characters. One of them is an occult expert, the other is an archaeologist, and they are both hired to work on this castle which is seemingly cursed, and their job is basically to uncurse it. The problem is that the main two characters are currently in a bit of a precarious situation with their careers. Both of their reputations have actually taken a hit recently, so they really need this job to be a success in order to actually improve their standing and, you know, do what they do basically. But they just really do not want to work together on this project, especially the archaeologist. He really doesn't want to work with somebody who's a self-proclaimed curse breaker, so at first he tries to get her fired. When that doesn't work and almost seems to make the situation even worse, they decided they actually have to join forces and work together on this castle, and then once the job is successfully done, they can both go their separate ways. So you can see how this book just sounds like it's gonna be incredible. We have the enemies to lovers romance. There's gonna be a cursed castle, which I'm actually curious what exactly the curse is going to be about. What does the curse do? And then we have the seemingly perfect setting. I think Scotland is a pretty good setting for like a fall ghostly book because you have so much nature around and all these mansions and castles and forests and such. So I think this is also gonna be a good one. This one hasn't come out yet. I think it comes out in October, so I'll definitely be on the lookout for that title to come out, and I'm possibly gonna read it this year. It's definitely in my plans, but we're gonna see what life has in plan, you know. The next book I want to tell you about is once again more of in a category of itself, because it seems to be more like a cozy, small town, just everyday living sort of book. It's a book called The Book Charmer by Karen Hawkins. And I think this one is a bit of an older release, so some of you may have actually already read it, but it just reminds me so much. I've recently watched, or like last year I watched the TV show The Good Witch, and that's exactly what this book actually reminds me of. So if you're a fan of The Good Witch, you might actually be interested in hearing about this book. We basically follow two young women, two young independent women. One of them is a librarian. She's called Sarah Dove. She lives in this small town called Duff Pond. And she has a bit of a knack of finding the perfect book for every reader, so she basically pairs up every single person with exactly the book that they are looking for. And life is fine until her books actually start whispering to her about this new arrival in town, about this young woman called Grace who has just recently moved here, and she seemingly might be the person able to save their town. The synopsis doesn't really hint about what exactly is threatening their town, but yeah, apparently this new woman called Grace might actually be the answer to their questions. So yeah, I'm so excited because just like in The Good Witch, where we have the main character who has a bit of like an enhanced intuition and she uses that power to help people in her town, that's exactly what it sounds like the main character in the book does as well, like Sarah with her books and the library and the reading. So yeah, this book just sounds very charming. I think it definitely ticks off two of the most important boxes when it comes to like my personal like fall reading taste, which is small town setting and a little hint of magic. Those just sound like the most magical, whimsical story ever. And then obviously the main character's power is connected to books, which is just an added bonus. So I'm definitely really looking forward to jumping into the book charmer. Definitely let me know if you have personally read it or whether you have it on your TBR as well, because I'm definitely already charmed by it and I haven't even read it yet. Okay, we've come up to another category. This one personally is just the most exciting one, and that's because it's the witchy books. So there have been so many incredible sounding, at least, witchy book releases over the past couple of years, and I have just been adding all of them to my TBR. And so for this list, it was actually hard to narrow down which ones I definitely want to get to this fall, but I tried. So I want to tell you about 4 or 5, I'm not even sure, witchy books that are actually subcategorized as well. So some of them are more on the cozy funny side, the others are more on like the horror side or spooky side, slightly darker side. But starting off with the cozy ones, so let me tell you about the cozy ones. The first one is called The Modern Girl's Guide to Magic, and it's by Linsey Hall. I'm actually gonna read you the synopsis because I don't think I can really do it justice with my own words. But it goes. So here's the deal. I'm a magical disaster. A witch from a family of witches, and the only one whose magic blows up in her face. Which is why I came up with my rules. Number 1. Never get involved with magic. Number 2. If you must, do not enter a competition to win the biggest magical fortune in England. And number 3, definitely don't fall for Callan Hawthorne, the sexy billionaire mage who you've hated for years. So how the heck do I end up in a situation that promises to break all those rules? It's the only way to save Seaside Spells, my family's magical potion shop. But it's cool. When I go back home to Charming Cove, a village of ancient pubs and foul-mouthed familiars, I will totally ignore Witch Weekly's Sexiest Man of the Year, and I'll win the competition. And if I'm lucky, I won't turn myself into a toad in the process. This'll be fine. It'll all be fine. So once again, this book just ticks off so many boxes of like fall reading recommendations. We have the magical small town setting. We have a family who freaking owns a magical potion shop. Sounds perfect. We also have a magical competition, and we have a bit of an enemies to lovers romance between two, like a witch and a mage. Just sounds perfect, you know? It has so many elements that just sound incredible, and together I think just are gonna make a really good book. So this is definitely one that I'm really looking forward to. It kind of reminds me of The X-Hex by Erin Sterling, so I'm definitely incredibly excited to be jumping into this one. Okay, listen guys, this next book just sounds like it's gonna be a comedy powerhouse, and I could not be more excited and happy to tell you about this book. So it's called A Witch's Guide to Fake Dating a Demon by Sarah Hawley, and it just sounds hilarious. Basically, we follow a couple of characters. We have a witch and a demon. So the witch Maehrer, she actually is seemingly one of the most powerful witches of her family in generations, in like centuries. But unfortunately for her family, to the huge frustration of her mother especially, Maehrer isn't actually all that interested in being a witch. She doesn't really care about magic and her abilities. She much prefers baking and gardening and just doing other like ordinary life things. Things do go sideways though when Maehrer actually tries to summon flowers, but instead of flower, what ends up popping up is a demon. Enter the demon character called Ozworth, and he's actually one of the greatest demons of all time and all that, but recently his reputation has taken a bit of a hit because there were some deals and some bargains that went sideways. So this time when Ozworth shows up, he's determined to actually make a bargain with Maehrer. But to Maehril's unfortunate, the bargain that she summoned him with was actually for a soul bargain. So what ends up happening is that the wills of these two characters ends up clashing because neither of them obviously wants to you know, show leniency to the other. Obviously, Mariel doesn't want to give up her soul because she's pretty attached to her soul, you know? But obviously Osric is also not gonna give up because his demonness or something is dependent on how well this goes. And just to add a little cherry on top of this already very delicious cake, when Mariel's mother ends up asking why there's this man that keeps following her around, meaning Osric, Mariel ends up saying that they're actually dating. So now what we have is a witch and a demon fake dating. So please tell me that does not sound like the funniest, most exciting witchy rom-com out there. Like, I have a feeling it's just gonna be amazing. It's kind of like if Kingdom of the Wicked tried to be like a funny comedic rom-com. I feel like that's what Witch's Guide to Fake Dating a Demon is gonna be. And there's also a sequel already out, and it's called the something of wooing, the art of wooing a witch, I think it's called. I definitely want to get to both of them, but I'll be happy if I just get to the first one. So yeah, that was A Witch's Guide to Fake Dating a Demon. Okay, so the next witchy book on this list is called The Unfortunate Side Effects of Heartbreak and Magic by Breanne Randall. And I love this book because it's first off pitched as for fans of practical magic and Gilmore Girls, but it's also compared to one of my favorite books of all time, which is The Very Secret Society of Irregular Witches by Sangu Mandana. By the way, that is actually a book that I've already read, and I would highly recommend it if you're looking for a cozy witchy book. You cannot get better than The Very Secret Society of Irregular Witches. So the fact that this book is actually compared to that book already made me so incredibly excited. But then we also have the story, and the story basically weaves magic and heartbreak together, just like the title says. In the story we follow the main character. She's called Sadie Reveler, and she seemingly has some power, but her power has unfortunately been cursed with 4 heartbreaks, whatever that means. It's actually not explained whether the heartbreaks are a good thing or a bad thing. But yeah, what ends up happening is that the main character's grandmother gets sick. She gets sick with cancer, and this really hits the main character very hard because her grandmother has always been the backbone of their family, and unfortunately the main character, Sadie, doesn't feel ready to actually take on that responsibility herself to, you know, continue on her grandmother's legacy of holding her family together. And to add to some trouble, the very boy who was her first heartbreak actually ends up coming back to town. And of course, spending time together, some old feelings start to resurface. And as Sadie's grandmother continues to grow more and more sick, Sadie has a very important decision to make. Whether love is actually more important than magic. I don't think the synopsis really reveals all that much about what the story exactly is going to be about. But it sounds like it's gonna be just a very charming, once again, very magical story. And I love the little bit of balance that the author put in there, you know, of heartbreak versus magic thing. So yeah, I just think it's gonna be a really good one. We're gonna move on to the next witchy book, which is actually the only one that's slightly darker on this list. It's called The Witches of Bone Hill by Ava Morgyn. And in this story, we actually follow a couple of estranged sisters. So we have Cordelia and we have Eustace. They find out that their great aunt or something passed away and she left them their estate, so the estate of their relatives. So these 2 sisters now have to pack up and go to this house, actually figure out what's going on there. I'm pretty sure their plan is actually just to fix it up and sell it, but that is unfortunately halted when they realize that it is protected by a dynasty trust, whatever that is, you know. And it is controlled by their late aunt's aging attorney, who insists that they actually have to live there. Unfortunately, while they are there, they actually start noticing that their health is getting progressively worse, and they realize that their relatives, their ancestors, had some dealings with the shadows, or whatever actually lurks in the shadows. And being the last 2 relatives alive, these shadows are now actually attacking them. It is fortunate though that they actually start realizing they might have some magical powers themselves, so it gives them a bit of an advantage to actually fight whatever is lurking in the shadow and trying to hurt them. So yeah, this one sounds like it's gonna be a little bit darker, especially after seeing that there's actually some people who have shelved it on Goodreads as horror. So there might definitely be some horror elements, which worries me personally, but I think some of you might actually find it exciting. What this book actually reminds me of is Cackle by Rachel Harrison, because that book, while being kind of cozy and very comforting, it was also kind of scary and horror-ish in some places. So I have a feeling The Witches of Bone Hill might actually go in a similar direction of not being like straight up horror, but just having some horror elements alongside all the like family things that the two sisters have to figure out. And this does actually tie us nicely into the next book on this list, which isn't technically a book, it's more an author. I just want to read more of Rachel Harrison this autumn. I know that she's released 2 books since Cackle came out. So she released Such Sharp Teeth last year, I believe, during autumn, and I'm still very sad that I actually didn't get around to reading that one. And now this year she's coming out with a book called Black Sheep. So I think this new book is actually going to be about a young woman who feels like the black sheep in her family, which is actually a good thing because her family are part of a cult, maybe even cult leaders or something. So yeah, like the book sounds like it's gonna be absolutely insane and very weird, but it's Rachel Harrison, so you can definitely expect some very good writing and some very good storytelling and some very realistic look at things. But for me personally this year, I just really want to jump into Such Sharp Teeth. In that one, we actually follow a young woman who ends up moving back to her hometown where she has sworn she was never going to go back to, but her sister called and she's actually pregnant and estranged with the baby's father. And so the main character, Rory, actually promises to come back home and help her out with the baby. Unfortunately, one night when Rory goes out drinking or something, she ends up hitting an animal. And while she goes to check if the animal is okay, whether she ran it over or whatever, she ends up being attacked by the animal. After the accidents, Rory starts noticing some changes in herself, like the moon suddenly has some sort of appeal to her, she is allergic to silver, she seems to be just a little bit more wild, so she's definitely going through some changes. And she starts asking herself whether she actually is more danger to her family now, going through the changes, or whether it's actually safe for her to stay with them. So yeah, I cannot wait about this book. Like, I love Rachel Harrison's writing. She does an amazing job of blending all these like paranormal, fantastical elements with very much real life situations and real life perspective, I guess you could call it. So yeah, she blends those very well, and I always enjoy her books. Like, I know I've only read one of her books, I've only read Cackle, but I love that one so much. It definitely made her like an author for me immediately. Like, I want to read everything that she ever writes. So yeah, definitely I'm really looking forward to actually jumping into Such Sharp Teeth. I think it's gonna be a really good one. And that brings us to the next category. So next up we have some middle grades, and I once again just subcategorize them. So we have a couple of like cozy mystery middle grades, some more like spooky, slightly scary middle grades, but not too scary. And then lastly, just some more whimsical sounding or just like straight up cozy magical middle grades. And starting off with the murder mystery. Let's go for the murder mysteries first. I have here a book called The Curious Vanishing of Beatrice Willoughby, and it's by G.Z. Schmidt. I'm once again gonna read it a synopsis just because it sounds way better if you read a synopsis, and I cannot do it justice, seriously. So it says, the Amadeuses were always considered somewhat strange, even before the incident. When 6-year-old Beatrice Willoughby vanished at the Amadeuses' annual All Hallows Eve party, people in the tiny mountain town of Nevermore were quick to whisper, they were always odd, their house is full of dark magic. And when Mort Amadeus was packed for the crime, the Amadeuses, once the center of society, retreated. They closed their doors, disappeared from life, people almost forgot. Until 13 years later, when 6 envelopes land at the doorstep of 6 households in town. We cordially invite you to the celebration on the 31st of October this Saturday evening at the Amadeus' household. And so the story goes, basically the Amadeuses throw this huge party, invite all the suspects of the disappearance of Beatrice Willoughby, and basically, I imagine, test them out and figure out who exactly made Beatrice disappear. What exactly happened to Beatrice even. So yeah, it sounds like it's gonna be very atmospheric. Like, for some reason the synopsis gives me the Addams Family vibes. I don't know whether the author was going for that or not. Also a confession, I actually haven't seen the Addams Family yet. Like, I've just seen photos, and somehow the aesthetic of the Addams Family seems to fit into the synopsis somewhat. So that's why I'm making that assumption. But yeah, it just sounds like it's gonna be maybe not exactly a cozy mystery, but maybe a spooky mystery. Perfect for October and perfect for Halloween. So yeah, I'm definitely really looking forward to jumping into the curious vanishing of Beatrice Willoughby. Definitely let me know if you'd be interested in this one as well. Next up, we do have a cozy middle grade mystery, and this one is called The Swifts by Beth Lincoln, and it's also illustrated. Oh, that's very pretty. So it's illustrated by Claire Powell. And in this story, we actually follow a family called the Swifts, and it's a bit of a strange family. So whenever a new member of the Swifts is born, what they do is that they bring it in front of their sacred family dictionary, and for every member a word and a definition is picked, and they are named after this word and actually are also expected to live up to the word and the definition with their life. And the main character we follow, she's called Shenanigans Swift, so of course, as expected by her name, she's a little mischief maker. But nothing too major happens until one family gathering where all her relatives actually come to visit, and her great-grandmother or grandmother actually ends up being murdered. So the story kind of follows the progression from there, trying to figure out who exactly did the murdering. The synopsis also mentions that Shenanigan is kind of going through a bit of soul searching, of trying to figure out in what way her name defines her and in what way she can actually get to define herself. So I love this combination of like a cozy murder mystery, this strange family, and the main character just going through a bit of personal growth and self-discovery. So I think it's definitely gonna be like a really good pick for this autumn, and it's definitely one of the most original and kind of unique premises to the story, you know, aside from the murder mystery. I really like the thing with the dictionary and the names and the definitions and the thing, so I think this one is gonna be a good one. Definitely let me know if you want to pick it up as well, or if you've read it before. I think it's been out for a while now, but yeah, it just sounds like it's gonna be very sweet. Okay, the next book that we have here is actually the one potentially spooky middle grade that I put on this list. The story is called Dark and Dangerous Gifts of Delores MacKenzie, and it's by Yvonne Banham. I'm gonna once again read you the synopsis. I'm so sorry to anybody who hates it when people read the synopsis, but it's short, so at least there's that. And it says, when Delores MacKenzie is chased home by a restless spirit, she is sent to the mysterious uncles in Edinburgh Old Town to learn how to control her unusual gifts. Scared and alone, she finds her new home at the Tolbooth bookstore is full of curious surprises, some welcome, others less so. But when a sinister apparition threatens the lives of her strange new housemates, Delores must gather all her strength to save them. So you kind of get an idea of who her new like housemates are gonna be from the cover. So there seems to be kind of like is that like a gargoyle or something, and maybe some, is that a zombie or something, and a bird and a magician or something, so I don't even know. But the cover definitely promises like it's gonna be a very eccentric bunch of people living together, and we seemingly have like an evil spirit, so that's where the potentially spooky vibes are gonna come from. I am kind of excited about this one because it's not a murder mystery, but it still includes a little bit of magic and some creatures that could potentially be non-human. So yeah, it just looks like it's gonna be really fun. Oh, and I also want to draw your attention to this little lower part of the cover where there seem to be two little girls with black holes for eyes. So yeah, I definitely expect this book to be just a little bit spooky. Yeah, the synopsis doesn't really give you much, but it promises just a little bit of an atmospheric story with, once again, a Scottish setting. What is it with these fall books in a Scottish setting? That's kind of really fun, actually. So yeah, I think that's gonna be a good one. A good spooky middle grade. Definitely let me know if you'd be interested in reading that one, because it's definitely just jumped into the top of my priority list with those two girls with no eyes, you know? The last two middle grade books on the list are more on like the whimsical, magical side, not so much spooky, scary, atmospheric or anything. The first one is called Valentine Crow and Mr. Death by Jenni Spangler. In this one, we actually follow a couple of characters who have grown up together in the hospital, until the day when they actually are to be sent out to become apprentices for somebody. And in the case of Valentine Crow, he actually becomes the apprentice of Death himself. And all's fine, pretty much, until the day when the name that appears on his list of the soul that he has to collect is actually the name of his best friend that he's grown up with. So now Valentine is kind of faced with the choice of whether he will actually go and collect her soul, or whether he is actually gonna try and fight death itself. This book actually sounds very sad because it makes me think that you know, the reason why the two main characters grew up in a hospital is because they potentially have a terminal illness. So the reason why the name of Valentine's best friend appears on the list could actually be just because the illness has progressed so far where it will be very hard to save her. And that is very sad. That is very, very sad. So yeah, but just the cover made me think that this would actually be a very fitting read for possibly November. You know, November is kind of like the time for those more sad and kind of deep stories, but still with some like atmospheric and autumnal feeling to them, if you know what I mean. And the other kind of magical middle grade on this list is called The Creature Keeper by Damaris Young. I'm once again gonna read you the synopsis because it makes it sound really cool. So it says, creepy Dire Hall sits glowering on the moors. If you stray too close, then beware the growls and the scary sounds from within. When animal lover Cora learns that Direspire's mysterious owner is looking for a new creature keeper, she realizes this might just be the chance that she's looking for to save her parents' farm. But Direspire Hall is a spooky place, and the strange creatures who live there are nothing like Cora is expecting. As Cora settles in her new life, it soon becomes clear that Direspire has its secrets, and that somebody will do whatever it takes to keep them. So yeah, it sounds like it's gonna be amazing. We have the mysterious, like dangerous, magical creatures living in this Direspire Hall, whatever the heck that is. You know what this book kind of reminds me of, actually? Night Books by J.A. White. I don't know whether you guys know that book. I don't know whether I have it here or downstairs. I think I have it downstairs. But it a little bit reminds me of Night Books and like the secret garden that the witch had in her apartment. That's kind of what I'm expecting, but slightly spookier and obviously with magical creatures, not plants. So yeah, this one just sounds very good. Honestly, I kind of added it because it just seems very magical. And I thought it would be kind of like a good combination with the other slightly spookier, mysterious books, you know? So yeah, that was The Creature Keeper by Damaris Young. Okay, everybody, we're down to the last 3 books, and this next one is actually a very highly anticipated book by many people. It's called Assistant to the Villain by Nicole Maehrer. And you've probably heard about it. Like, if you've been scouring any of the book social media, you have probably heard about this book. But basically, we follow a young woman who ends up being hired as an assistant to the villain, just as the title says. And what happens is that this woman falls in love with the villain, who's her boss. And of course, when some danger pops up to her boss and his business, she's actually gonna do everything in her power to help him out and defeat whoever is trying to bring him down. It sounds like it's gonna be so hilarious. And apparently, this was like a TikTok series first, and now the author has turned it into a novel, which I didn't actually know, but I might check it out before actually reading it, or possibly after reading it, because no spoilers. But yeah, like, the synopsis really doesn't give you much, but just the premise of this woman falling in love with this character who's called the villain is definitely a book where it's safe to assume the characters are gonna be morally grey, or at least have very questionable morals. And that always makes for a good story, so it's definitely a fun one. And I'm really looking forward to it. The next up on this list is The Hexologist by Josiah Bancroft. And this one sounds kind of wild. Honestly, it kind of gives me a witchy version of Ghostbusters or something, because we follow a couple of characters. I think they're brothers, or brother and sister or something. I think. Don't like quote me on that, but we follow the 2 main characters called the Hexologists, and they are kind of like in the know about the magic, you know? They aren't strangers to magic because their job actually is to figure out all these weird, strange happenings with the help of hexes and charms and magical artifacts and that sort of thing. Like, they have never really gotten a request that would weird them out until one day they are actually approached by a member of the royal family saying that the king wants to be baked into a cake. And this by far turns out to be like the strangest request they've ever gotten. So they go to investigate and realize it's the working of an anti-royalist gang, some avaricious ghouls, and an alchemist who draw their power from hell-like dimension. And that's not all, it's also the workings of a bookish dragon. The book freaking has a bookish dragon. Like, on top of all these already amazing sounding things, they add a bookish freaking dragon. So yeah. Safe to say, the book sounds like it's gonna be very exciting, very magical and strange, and magical. Did I say magical? Yeah. So yeah, I'm definitely really looking forward to actually jumping into the Hexologist. If not this year, then probably in winter or sometime in the beginning of next year. I'm definitely reading it though. And finally, we made it to the last book on the list. This one is called All That Consumes Us. It's by Erica Waters. And this one kind of sounds like it could be dark academia. So we follow the main character called Tara, and she's offered a place at this very prestigious college called Corbin's College. And apparently everybody who graduates from there gets very prestigious like jobs and careers and whatnot, you know, all the works. But once Tara actually arrives at this college, her mind basically starts to unravel. She's a writer, but every story that she writes while she's at this college seems to be very dark and very twisted. She suddenly starts feeling like somebody's actually following her around through the halls of this college where she's at. She just feels very unsettled while she is there. And to top it all off, she actually finds out the secret that this Corbin College is desperately trying to keep, and it might be one of the most dangerous secrets that she could have uncovered there. So yeah, who else is excited? Like, on top of this being kind of dark academia-esque and having this Victorian college setting, we also have this idea of the main character being a bit of an unreliable narrator because we don't really know what mental state she's in, what effect this college is having on her. So yeah, it sounds like it's gonna be atmospheric, it sounds like it's gonna be spooky and scary. So basically the book has the potential making of one of the better dark academia books coming out this year. And I kind of really want to check it out actually. Especially love the cover, the way it's half and half, and one of the hands is okay, the other is not, you know, it just looks really cool. So yeah, but this one is only coming out in October, so it hasn't been released yet. It has been shelved as horror on Goodreads as well, so that sounds interesting. Might actually be worth it not sleeping for a couple of days just to read All That Consumes Us. Might be. But yeah, anyway, that has brought us to the end of this video. Thank you so much for checking it out. Definitely let me know if you have actually found any recommendations from this list. I really hope I did the books justice, and I'm sorry to anybody who feels annoyed when people read you the synopsis. But seriously, I couldn't have done the books justice if I had tried to summarize, you know, the synopsis with my own words. But yeah, I hope you're having a great day and night wherever you are. If you have any exciting books on your fall TBR list, definitely let me know. I'm always looking for good recommendations. There's always, you know, fall next year, but there's also the option of just reading fall perfect books all year and not just wait for fall, you know, so there's always that, you know. And yeah, I'm gonna finish it off here. Thank you so much for being here, and I hope you have a good one. So yeah, till next time, bye bye!